She wasn't an extrovert. She wasn't loud, but she had all this creativity, and it was a brilliant move. Who you put in the leadership role doesn't have to be your most successful person. Every office has a Winnie the Pooh type character. That was a real eye-opener, because once you start seeing personalities in the office, you're like, oh, that's a rabbit. Okay.
Welcome to Homegrown CEO, the podcast for entrepreneurs, leaders, and business builders seeking actionable insights to grow their ventures and themselves. I'm your host, Matt Colborn, and today's episode is a deep dive into talent, performance, and the great leaders behind truly brilliant teams. Our guest is Shannon Malone deBenedictis, Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker and founder of the creative services firm Padlin Creative. Throughout her impressive television career, Shannon has seen the true magic that happens when you lift others up to their full potential. As a mentor, leader, and a business owner, she'll share her tried and tested methods for nurturing talent, managing projects, and becoming the best leader you can be for your team. Let's welcome Shannon to the podcast. Let's start at the beginning. When you're putting a team together, what have you learned to look for, Shannon?
I want to put together the best team that overall, of course, is going to have success. And part of that success is, how are they going to complement each other? I remember once someone saying to me, I'm going to use an American analogy here, how would you like to have a team filled just with Michael Jordans? Like every person on your team be Michael Jordans. And I started laughing and I said, that would be horrible, because nobody would want to share the ball. How do you succeed as a team in order to get to your final goal? So I look at not only personality traits, but skill sets that they bring in order to get to what we need to do. When it comes to a producer or director, someone who has a good vision, someone who's clear with directions for an associate producer, someone who has hustle, initiative, and good research skills, someone who is a production manager who's very organized. It's not necessarily like, I think sometimes there's a focus on personality wise. Do they all get along? Do they all have the same interest? They need to have enough courtesy and respect and affability to get along. But, friendship isn't the end goal. The end goal is to have a really successful product in the end. So that's what I really want to look for, is complementary skills that will create the best possible picture, the best possible thing, because it's not going to be just one element. It's going to be multiple elements coming together.
Yeah, a lot of people often say, I want to build a culture of family, but I don't think family is really ever the right analogy for business, because you're going to have to work and treat people differently to how you would with your family. And I think a sports team is a great analogy, because you want to have a great group of people that are working towards some shared goals and want to really win together. But in picking that team and helping to bring it together, what are some of the things that some leaders miss when they're trying to make those decisions?
I think that first off, you see someone who's put into a leadership role. Sometimes they've been put into the leadership role because they've been really successful at the job that they've done. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best leader in order to ensure that the team succeeds. A great example of it, is Man City, in the EPL. Pep Guardiola is not the best player on that team, but he's the best coach for that team, right? He brings that skill set to ensure that every player brings their talents to the table and they succeed. And I think that's part of it when you're looking at that, is who you put in the leadership role doesn't have to be your most successful person. It's going to be the person that's going to motivate, oversee, challenge, and execute the rest of the team to succeed. And then when you're looking at the roles to fill that in, again, sports, I think, is a really great analogy. You're not looking for all strikers. You're not looking for all forwards or halfbacks or, defensive people. You need people who are good in those roles to ensure success. So in doing that, you need to look at it more of how can you fill those pieces in order to put the most successful team together. And like you said, I think sports is a really great analogy to it. When people say, I want a team that's like a family, look, I come from a giant Irish Catholic family with like over 40 cousins and 6 siblings, and their highs and their lows. And boy, communication isn't necessarily great in a family. You want good communication, you want trust, you want people who are working together to ensure that success.
So if being the best at the job isn't always the right qualification, what is
Mhm.
then, in your opinion, a defining quality that suggests someone is the right leader or coach for that team?
I think it's for the leader or coach for that team, I think it's how do they motivate or recognize the team that's
Mm,
around them? How are they utilizing their skills in order to succeed to the goal, get to their goal? I think when I'm overseeing a production, my ultimate goal is to finish that film. It is to finish
mm,
that project, finish that cut, etc. And there are many different departments and many different people who are going to contribute to that. How do I ensure that everybody hits their deadlines, does it properly, does it successfully, and in a collaborative way? So I think you need to look at someone who is a consensus builder, but
mm,
not just in a yes man way, but someone who can bring people together to say this is our ultimate goal. I think you need someone who has good vision in like, I like to say at 10,000 feet, who can look and see potential problems as they go along, and then when problems do happen, the ability to pivot, the ability to rearrange everything or do things because that goal is still there. It's not going to that doesn't disappear. So how do you keep the team together or motivate or pivot
mm,
to ensure that you're still going to reach that goal? And television production, film production, problems happen all the time. That is just part of it. You have to have plan A through plan Z. So it has to be someone who's ready to know when that problem occurs, it's okay. We're
mm.
still moving forward, and this is how we're gonna succeed.
So, talking about some of those problems, that often equates to letting people learn along the way, right? And
Mhm,
there's a real sense of having to nurture,
mhm.
inside that team environment. But the nurturing can be both exhausting and energizing. What do you find happens with the nurturing in your experience?
I think that it's, I do a lot of wildlife documentaries, and so I
Mm,
get to see a lot in the wild of how nurture, nature, parenting, how this all kind of works to get together. And I think you have to find a real balance between letting people try things out
mm,
trial and error and and that ability, that freedom to succeed or fail, but also that knowledge that I'm not going to abandon you. I have your back, that there's going to be times that you're going to take a risk and you're going to fall flat on your face and I'm going to help ensure that it's okay. I'll help you pick yourself up, you learn from it and you keep moving forward. So, I think that I really believe is giving very clear feedback to people,
mm,
both positive and constructive. And a lot of times, as I was mentioning, when people are put into a leadership position, I think they're afraid to give constructive feedback. I think they're afraid of people's reaction. Maybe it's the family thing. You don't really want to feel like you're cutting the legs out from anybody. But when you give constructive feedback, honest, sincere feedback, then that can help that person grow and bring more ideas to the table, bring more originality, push even further that might be the solution that you're looking
mm.
for. So I think it's a nurture, it's a let them kind of swim on their own, be there to help them out because from that you can get real creativity and real success from
Mm.
that.
We'll circle back to the feedback piece in a moment. I'm keen to hear more of your thoughts on that. But when something goes
Mhm.
wrong, like really wrong, we often hear about people being thrown under the bus by colleagues or their boss.
Oh, yeah.
But how do you handle that in a way that keeps people willing to take risks again? What's the opposite of not throwing someone under the bus? What does that look like?
The opposite of that is you let someone fail and still succeed. I think that's a good way to phrase it.
Mm,
I've been thrown under the bus. It's not something new to me. It's happened to me. When you're mentoring someone or you're working with someone,
mm,
if you want to encourage creativity and you want to encourage, something to break through, just something different, particularly if you're in a field that creativity is what you're selling. That's
mm,
that's your that's your that's your commodity, right? You want people to feel that risk, but you don't want it to be so crazy and so whatnot that they're going to fail every time they go out. I think when they fail, you have to be very accurate and very detailed in this was the process, this is where we led on, this
mm,
is this is what we agreed to, and this is where it didn't go right, right? I had a situation recently where I had a producer, it was a very important shoot, lots of technology, it was an
mm,
aerial shoot, tens of thousands of dollars, and numerous things went wrong that ultimately the footage was, for the most part, completely useless.
Oh,
So,
no.
we had to pivot. We had to solve how are we going to do it? Because remember, that goal is still there. So we
Mm,
pivoted. We kept the train moving forward. But I sat the producer down and we broke down everything of where things went right and where things went wrong,
mm,
with also my leadership where I failed in giving too much leash, giving too much, not paying attention close enough that I should have been a little bit more attentive and saying, wait, you were struggling with this and I didn't realize that. This is how we can continue to move forward. So it was, owning it as the leader as well. It allowed her to learn and gave the feedback of, "Next time, I don't want you to be fearful of doing this, but here's where we can learn from it, and you can make sure that this doesn't happen again, that you can continue to take chances and continue to take risk, but now you have experience. You have experience to figure out how to not for that not to happen." When it breaks down is when you give people leash and you let them go try and break the rules, and then it fails, and you come back and you say, "Okay, don't break the rules. You failed. This is what happens." And then they go do it again. They go do it again and go do it again. And then it's like, well, no, now you're not learning. Now you're not growing. Now you're just kind of stuck in this and thinking this is right when we've already instructed you that this is wrong.
mm.
So that's when you kind of back away and say, you're not thinking of the team, because when you make a mistake, you set the team back. You're not thinking of the entire project. You're thinking only about your idea and this. So it's got to be a learning moment that they can build on.
So I think that's an interesting one for leaders in giving them enough leash, as you say, so
Mhm.
they can try and really find that success on their own, but then actually owning it as a leader when it hasn't gone right. And the criticism
Mhm.
is, well, I've given them too much leash. How do you really find a balance with that?
Hmm. I think I think you have to look at what the stakes are,
Mm,
and you can't do it all the time. Sometimes the situation is there's not enough room for error. There's no margin for error.
mm,
Ergo, I don't want to give you too much of a leash because this is the problem. This is what could happen and we can't risk it. But other times, you know what? Here is flexibility. Here is an opportunity to let you do that and let you kind of expand and grow and give it a shot. I think you have to, as a leader, be aware enough of what are scenarios that you can let them out, let them go, be free, roam, have fun, do whatever. And then there are times where it's like, you know what, this isn't the best time. I've been with junior people where we've gone into big meetings, whether it's at Netflix or Nat Geo or Disney or
mm,
whoever, and it's like, you know what, this is not your time to take the lead. This is my time to take the lead. Because if this pivots, I don't think you have experience enough to know how to
mm.
pivot if they throw something at you. But if it's a meeting with maybe a collaborator or somebody that I think, you know what, they're going to be understanding. It's not going to be as much of a tense situation. It's a great experience for them to see it in action, to experience exactly what happens. So it's a judgment call. And sometimes you're going to make the wrong call, as a leader. And if you're a good leader, when it goes wrong, you don't throw that person under the bus. You accept the responsibility that you're the one who gave them permission to do it, and it's ultimately your decision.
So, Shannon, is part of what you're saying here and the subtlety for new and emerging leaders is that it's not so much about the length of the leash culturally in your leadership, but finding the right leash for each person individually in your team?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what I'm saying because like I said at the beginning, you can't have a team filled with strikers. You can't have a team filled with halfbacks. You've got to
Mm,
have a Jordan Pickford sitting in the goal. You've got to have somebody there, right? So that leash is going to alternate. The type of leash you have is going to be different for the different groups that you're overseeing. And how you're able to synchronize that, how you're able to do that, is going to be how best it succeeds, how best you're able to move everybody forward and hit your goal. And when you hit that goal, when you do that and you make sure that everybody gets the recognition they deserve, everybody feels like they've taken chances and everybody feels that they've succeeded, and they have.
And do you often, every now and then, find someone or hear of someone in a team that just much prefers as a team member to be on a much shorter leash? They don't like being allowed to have a big run?
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully admit that's a struggle for me. That's a struggle for
Mm,
me as a leader, as a head of a team. Is I like having people who want to push, but people who want a list where this is what you do, here's your checklist. They do the checklist, and then they want the next checklist, the next thing to do. That's something that's not my strong point. However, however, remember I was mentioning that you have
Mm,
different teams and different this. You're ultimately gonna have also kind of, your assistant coaches. Let's
mm,
continue with the analogy. Maybe you do have an assistant coach who's really good at that, who's really good at managing team members who need things, everything drawn up perfectly, completely outlined, completely planned out. Then that's something you work with that person to ensure that that team member is getting the feedback and the guidance they need.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm renowned for not ever having a leash at all and giving people so much. There's no rope at all with it, but
Yeah.
yeah, very fortunate to have some people in my businesses that know exactly how to find the right length and help team members. I'm like, well, if you feel like you've got too much leash, just stay little bit closer. But there's no set length. Now, with that, delivering feedback is probably one of
Mhm.
the really crucial aspects that comes to not only developing the team but the individuals. Are there some instances where you've seen that it has really contributed to the development of a mentee?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I've always been very open with
Mm,
people I've managed. I've always been, having a give and take with them
mm,
and seeing where they wanna go and recognizing what their skills are and maybe pushing them towards one thing or identifying another thing. And because, again, it's not just that I like mentoring people or
mm,
working with I do, I actually love it, but I also always in the back of my mind is what's going to make the company successful? What's going to make the
mm,
project successful? Maybe this is where we need to kind of push them and so getting to know interest of different people I think
mm,
is really really important and part of that is the feedback and sitting down and discovering where their interest is that interest really viable,
mm,
and then if that is an area that we think there's growth and it's going to help the team, how do I continue to nurture that to get the most out of them and get the best out of them and they feel really really inspired, they feel really motivated. I had an associate producer who was working with me, and she was she had been working in the industry for many many years. She had just joined my team, and we happened to be on a shoot together. So we ended up being in a
mm.
car, lots of
Yeah,
time in a
yeah,
car, getting to know each other. And we started talking about her experience, and I started giving her
yeah.
feedback and said, "Look, I think you're really great here. I think you need to focus here. I think this is a part that you struggle with. I think it's you really this is you should push. I can help you, give you resources, I'll give you more opportunities in this." And she paused and she said she had been in the business for 10 years and nobody had sat her down and gave her feedback, who gave her
Yeah.
honest critique. But it helped her focus. And now she's doing her own documentary now. So now she's got kind of the tools of recognizing this is what she's good at, this is what she's keep an eye on, here's the people she should bring on. So it was great to kind of help her see, here's how you can move forward if you really want to go in this direction with your career.
Yeah, it can be really hard to get past that surface level understanding of what your people are capable of. And I love that you
Mhm.
just share that example of the traveling, because when you travel with someone and you're in that kind of captive close proximity, there really is a great opportunity to get past that surface level understanding. I have a general manager in one of my businesses who her and I have traveled quite a lot together from trains and car rides and flights, and we have a much better understanding at a deeper level of what both of us are capable of, and that's only really come from being locked in together on some really long trips together. What are some other
Yeah.
ways that people can dig deeper and get past that surface level understanding of what their people are actually capable of?
I think that knowing how your team how their personality works in a team, knowing how the dynamics are, um, seeing where they might rise to the surface, and then
Mm,
poking a little bit, scratching at the surface and saying, "Is this something that you might be really, really talented at? This might be something that you're really good at." I think that it's really important not to back to your nurturing and kind of understanding, you don't wanna smother your employees. And certainly, I think one flaw that happens is it's good if you're friends with your employees, but you shouldn't be friends with your employees. You
mm,
should be friendly with your employee. I think that's a
mm,
that's a best way, because I think if you have sincere friendships, then sometimes that can get in the way of what the ultimate business goal. And I know that
mm.
makes me sound like an absolute horrible person, but ultimately, again, it's back to the family comment. We're not there to be a family. We're there to have the business succeed, and so you have to keep that always in the back of your mind. But having that kind of interaction to know what their motivations are, what they're intrigued by,
Mm.
why they got into the business, what they're interested in, where they want to go, why they did this, could open some opportunities for junior people. It could really, really get a better understanding of what they're motivated by and how you, again, can get the most out of them. And that comes from interaction. It comes
Yeah.
from, like you said, being locked in a car with them, just talking, observing, doing little things. Those are the opportunities to see perhaps there's things there that you didn't know that's going to be really, really great for the team or really great for the project.
Yeah, people always say after they've traveled with me how exhausting it was, and I always feel so energized. And I realize it's because they've had this
Yeah.
really deep emotional experience having to travel alongside with me. Beyond the travel, I guess there's things like the regular check-ins and one-on-ones
Mhm.
that we have with people. And part of the formula that I use is around, what's happening professionally with you, what's happening personally with you, and what's pissing you off.
Mhm.
And it doesn't sort of follow that kind of rigid structure, but they're the sort of themes that I'm talking through. What's some of the formats or the structures you've used in some of your meetings to find out some of those triangulations of similar inputs?
Exactly what you said. I think
Mm.
it's talking about bringing up things like, "Did everybody see this last weekend?" Or, "Did
Mm.
people watch this?" Or, um, just kinda general what used to be water cooler talks, what
Mm.
used to be those types of conversations. Um, Opportunities when if you have a group outing or whatever, to make sure that you kind of talk to each person and get a little bit
Mm.
more insight into them. And I think also just listening to what they're
Mm.
saying and seeing if there's something below that, seeing if there's something maybe a little bit more to kind of, dig in and discover. There was a brilliant researcher who was working for us. This woman was incredibly organized. She was coveted by some of the showrunners who work for me for
Mm.
her archive research and her ability to kind of dig in to get into minutia. And she sat very quietly, headphones on.
Mm.
She did her work. For the showrunner, she was a dream, right?
Yeah.
I got to know her, and she was a pop culture encyclopedia, an absolute pop culture encyclopedia who knew all these new techniques. She talked about rare, and I think it was because I had mentioned that I had seen this incredibly rare silent horror film. It was the first horror film ever made, like from
Right.
1927 or 1926. It was crazy. This movie was crazy, and she had seen it and kind of opened up this box. And it turned
Mm.
out, I said, you know what? Do you want to come into show development? Because she
Mm.
was remarkably creative. She wasn't an extrovert. She wasn't loud, but she had all this creativity, and it was a brilliant move
Mm.
because it was finding something else. It was like, wait a minute, you're secretly this kind of creative nerd who likes looking at things from a different perspective. I
Mm.
need that. And she was like, "Yes, I don't want to do research all the time." I'm like, come with me. Come,
Yeah.
let's expand it." And now
Yeah.
she's doing great work in LA. So I think that's part of it. It's get to know people,
Mm.
and listen for those cues, listen for those things that maybe gives you an insight on other talents they might have.
You've got a really clear and experienced leadership approach. Are there
Mhm.
any, useful books or resources that you can recommend that have helped you personally along the way with your own leadership journey?
I think there's 2 that I recommend. One is a new one. It's called The
Yeah.
Likeable Badass by Allison
Okay.
Fragale or Fragale, Fragale,
Okay.
and it's specifically for women leaders, and it talks about how sometimes women are made to feel in the workplace that they're made to feel that they have to be tough and stern and mean and everything, or they have to be super friendly, and this is, you can be authoritative, you can be deliberate, you can be assertive and still be friendly and still be likable, and ways you can do that. And when I read this book, it was a revelation and also affirmation because it was very much how I approach my management style. So that was a real influence. And then the one I love talking about, it's from the 1990s. It was called Winnie the Pooh on Management. It's
Okay.
out of print, but you can find it.
Okay.
But it's a great book. And one of the things it talks about is how you take personalities in the office and you break them down into every office has a Winnie the Pooh type character
Okay.
and how to work with that type of character. So you have Kanga, the maternal person, you have Owl, the elder person who knows it all and has seen it all. You have Eeyore, the crank. You
Mm,
have Tigger, the person who's super excited about doing everything but doesn't really follow through. You
mm,
have the intern who's obviously Rue, and you have Rabbit. Rabbit is thinks they know it all but doesn't really, right? And Piglet, the nervous person. Piglet's always there's always someone in the office who's nervous. And the idea is you wanna be Pooh, is
yeah.
you wanna be Pooh in that you kind of approach everything and just kinda let it go, and you kinda lead people by your personality and let their strengths come through. And that was a real eye opener because once you start seeing personalities in the office, you're like, "Oh, that's a rabbit. Okay." And you learn how to deal with it. Or, "Oh, they're such a piglet. They're just really nervous," and you have to learn because, I'm approaching, I'm 55. I'm not next to retirement I'm closer to
Mm,
retirement age than I am to entry level. I don't wanna be an owl. I don't wanna come in and be like, "I've seen it all. Back in the
mm.
day, we used to do that," because, that's not necessarily helpful either. So, I recommend it's a good read. It's a fun read, and again, once you see it, you won't unsee it in the office.
So, Shannon, you've given us some great advice so far. To summarize what we've spoken about today, what are a few pieces of advice that a leader should take forward from this conversation?
I think number 1 is stop trying to be the best,
Mm,
start trying to bring the best out of everybody in your office. I think leadership is really, really important to ensure that people bring the value to the team, to the project, and to themselves. And I think that's really important for success for everyone is if you concentrate on making them the best and not
mm,
ensuring that you're by far the best of overall. I think it's important to build kind of honest feedback and honest rapport with your team so they can see the value, they can see the potential they bring and help them achieve their goals in line with the success of the project and your
mm,
company. And I'm really big about staying curious about in
mm,
life, in work, about the people who you're with. That person in your team might be the secret key to your next big success. And that requires paying attention. It requires asking questions. It requires being engaged in
mm.
the process, not fully removed from it. And it's hard because leaders deal with a lot. But if you find the time and you find the energy and the passion to do that, then I think you can be really successful.
So, I think a challenge that we can all take away from that last one is this week we should all go and try and ask at least one person what they're working on that excites them outside of their main role. And we'd probably all be quite surprised about what we find out.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, the name of the show, Homegrown CEO, it's all about the journey from the kitchen bench to the boardroom. Before you go,
Mhm.
Shannon, we'd love to hear about what we call your kitchen bench moment. So, looking back, what would you say was a major turning point in your career? Maybe that one experience that shaped your business or mindset going forward.
Early in my career, I was thrust into in my 20s, I was thrust into a leadership role,
Mm,
and I was young and excited and motivated and jazzed, and boy, we were gonna succeed. And, I was climbing a corporate ladder, and, during that time, my mother was battling an illness, and I had to walk away from that. I chose to
mm,
walk away from that career to be with my mother and to help her the last few years of her life, and it required a complete reset of my career.
mm,
I walked away from a very clear path, which led me to television. I jokingly say I tripped into television, but I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world because that moment, that bench moment you're talking about
mm,
was it made me realize that connections and creativity and and seeing things through and challenging yourself, and that life is going to throw you hurdles and work is going to throw you hurdles, and you can still get through it. You can still succeed.
Mm.
Really changed my philosophy towards life. It changed my philosophy towards work and everything. And so it was you know, I pivoted and took a nighttime job and took a 30 to 40% pay cut and, was doing that. And then 15 years later, I win 2 Emmys and, I'm collaborating with James Cameron and Sigourney Weaver and Dennis Quaid and doing that. So I think that moment was the one that I realized, finding those connections and still being passionate and still putting forth what you really care about, what's really important to you, you can still succeed and make you go forward even under the worst circumstances.
Thank you, Shannon, for joining us on Homegrown CEO.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Shannon's analogy has stuck with me. The best coaches of any sports team aren't necessarily the best players, but their eye for talent and their ability to build strategies around the strengths of each player, that's what wins trophies. Thank you for joining us today on the Homegrown CEO podcast. I hope my conversation with Shannon has given you some food for thought as a leader and some new ways to bring out the best in your team going forward. And if you're hungry for more, become a member of our exciting Homegrown CEO community to find exclusive resources to strengthen your own leadership skills, widen your network, and enjoy special bonus content from my conversation with Shannon. And click the link in the show notes to join us at a discounted rate. Until then, make sure you subscribe to the show to be the first to know when our next episode drops. We look forward to you joining us then. I've been Matt Colborn, host, Homegrown CEO.